Welcome to the Aga Khan Foundation USA Town Hall, part of this year's 2021 Virtual Voyage campaign. In today's program, we will be exploring how AKF is going the distance to help remote and hard-to-reach communities in Asia and Africa. My name is Shaiza Damji, and I'm delighted to be your moderator for our conversation today. I am a volunteer member of AKF USA's National Committee, and I am based in the Seattle, Washington area. Like you, I am a proud supporter of AKF's work, and today we have an exciting opportunity to hear from AKF USA's leadership team, as well as from some of my fellow National Committee members, as we respond to your questions about the Aga Khan Foundation's work, learning how your generous contributions make an impact in breaking the cycle of poverty and improving the quality of life for millions across Asia and Africa. I would like to first take a moment to welcome members of AKF USA's National Committee who are joining us today. The first panelist I would like to introduce is Sherina Ebrahim. Sherina is the chair of AKF USA's National Committee, and she is a senior partner at McKinsey & Company. Sherina has volunteered with AKF for a number of years, and she is based in the New Jersey area. Welcome, Sherina.
Thank you so much, Shaiza. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm really looking forward to answering some of our questions from our viewers.
Next, I would like to introduce Zahid Rahimtoola to the panel. Zahid is the vice chair of the National Committee and also serves as CFO of Global Asset Capital in Palo Alto, California. Zahid has volunteered with AKF for a number of years, where he has carefully stewarded the finances and programs. Welcome to the panel, Zahid.
Thank you, Shaiza. I'm delighted to join you all in this great discussion today.
Also joining us today are members of AKF USA's senior leadership team to help further elaborate on some of the programs that you, the viewers, have asked about. First, we have Khalil Sherif. Khalil is currently the interim CEO of AKF USA, a role he took on in early 2020. In addition to his role as CEO of AKF Canada, a position he has held since 2005. Khalil sits on several other boards, including the Global Center for Pluralism. He is a graduate of Harvard Law School, and during his time there, he served as a legal intern with the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda. Welcome, Khalil.
Well, thanks, Shaiza, very much for convening us, and it's a delight to be with you and to be spending some time with all of our supporters today.
And next, we have Steve Mason. Steve currently serves as the North American Director of Programs and Partnerships for AKF. He has an extensive history with AKF internationally over the past 15 years, during which time he has led AKF programs in Afghanistan, West Africa, and East Africa. And in his spare time, he coaches youth ultimate frisbee. Welcome, Steve.
Thanks, Shaiza. It's really great to be here.
Now, we have been receiving so many fantastic and insightful questions from you through the Virtual Voyage microsite and from your email responses. Please continue to share your follow-up questions in the chat box, and we will try to get to as many of them as we can. But to start off our conversation, so many of you have, of course, expressed concern about the situation in Afghanistan and how AKF and its sister agencies in the Aga Khan Development Network are responding. Khalil, can you tell us some more about the response in Afghanistan, given the recent developments?
Well, of course, Shaiza, I can understand why this is an area of such interest. Of course, the entire world is watching with great interest the recent developments in Afghanistan. What I can tell you is that the AKDN's commitment to the people of Afghanistan continues unabated, and our presence on the ground is continuing. We've got outstanding Afghan leadership that is stewarding the institutions on the ground. And we continue to focus on our deep relationships with the communities where we work and on focusing on the priorities they have for improving the quality of life of their families and their communities. Now, I should tell you that just a few weeks ago, at the invitation of the UN Secretary General, Michael Kolker, the Global General Manager of Aga Khan Foundation, participated in the United Nations high-level ministerial meeting on the humanitarian situation in Afghanistan. and was able to offer a statement on behalf of the AKDN at this critical time. You'll hear that he reiterated our commitment to the people of Afghanistan and urged the international community to continue its commitment to those people. Perhaps we can share with you now his brief remarks.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the agencies of the Aga Khan Development Network are honored to convey our abiding, unshaken commitment to the people of Afghanistan. Founded on profound respect for its many traditions and the bonds of our shared humanity, this allegiance is enduring. AKDN seeks to improve the quality of life of all communities it serves. Our efforts are premised on the ethical principles of Islam, which promote peace and harmony. With this ideal in mind, we thank the Secretary General and UN colleagues at this critical juncture. AKDN has stood with Afghans for more than 3 decades. We work at the community level to help realize individual and collective aspirations toward deliverable, sustainable solutions. With 10,000 Afghan staff across numerous provinces, in partnership, we provide life-saving medical treatment and healthcare for millions, education support for hundreds of thousands of girls and boys, early childhood development, rural infrastructure such as energy provision, roads, bridges, irrigation canals, greenhouses and warehouses, economic opportunity and support for family incomes, food security and agriculture, natural disaster and climate change resilience, connectivity and communications, professional training and continuing education for women and men, cultural heritage restoration. We are operational, this work is ongoing, and we will do more. The experience teaches us this: determined, transparent, and inclusive engagement, led and driven by Afghans in their communities, can and does take root and succeed, and bring real and lasting change. AKDN asks the international community to share in this lesson and to act with compassion and foresight. For now is the time to be present, remain in dialogue, and work together with communities for peace, cohesion, opportunity, and prosperity. Let us not turn away from decades of progress, or the 2/3 of Afghans under the age of 25 that have lived under the shadow of war, but with hopes and aspirations intact. We owe them the dignity, the promise of standing together in facing the future. We know today conditions are dire. Healthcare, education, food security, and the economy are all under profound strain. It's a country at risk of collapse. We therefore emphasize immediate corresponding measures. Restoring the banking system to facilitate international transfers, allowing financial support and market access. Authorizing direct support to healthcare and education providers. Arranging food aid, medicines, and work programs. And unblocking assistance already authorized for direct relief, as well as the tools and means to reduce future dependency. These steps must accelerate to averse a crisis of shocking, destabilizing proportion. Nor should we abandon the country's longer-term development, as the consequences and message would be profound. Here in this room, Afghanistan is thousands of miles away, yet within arm's reach. Its people deserve compassion and collective humanitarian action. Now and going forward, our actions must be meaningfully humane. Thank you.
So, as you heard from Michael, our long-term commitment to Afghanistan and its people remains absolutely central at this time. Now, I should tell you also that one of the core programs that AKF USA has been supporting in Afghanistan has been a very significant 5-year partnership with the United States Agency for International Development called Local Impact. It's a regional program that includes significant program support in Afghanistan, but also in Tajikistan and the Kyrgyz Republic. It's an exciting program, and I'd love to ask Steve Mason, my colleague, to say a bit about it and how it's unfolding and working even in this critical moment. Steve?
Sure, thanks, Khalil. As Khalil said, local impact is one of the most exciting projects in our portfolio right now. It's a $37.5 million project jointly funded by the US government and by donations from the public in the US. It's focused on a number of core activities in Afghanistan, Kyrgyz Republic, and Tajikistan, mainly around promoting economic growth, increasing access to renewable energy, building pluralism and social cohesion, and increasing the capacity of citizens and local institutions to define their own development solutions. That last part is the part of the program that I'm most excited about, because we are working closely with our beneficiary population to think about the development challenges they face on a day-to-day basis and to come up with creative and new ways to solve them. Already a lot of interesting things are coming up around a whole host of themes, such as better access to early childhood development for young children, better access to healthcare for adolescents, and better quality of education in schools. A really interesting part of the local impact project is something called the Catalyze Fund. This fund under the project is $6 million, and it's completely funded through the AKF portion of the project. The Catalyzed Fund is meant to take interesting pilots and ideas that have proved their efficiency and effectiveness to scale. I'd love to bring in my colleague, Nora Abugandia, who's a program manager with us, to tell you more about the Catalyzed Fund.
Thank you so much, Steve. As you mentioned, the Catalyze Fund is a pool of resources to stimulate and scale up innovative community-led development solutions. So for the past 2 years, AKF and USAID partners have been engaging in human-centered design processes that enable local communities to identify clear solutions to a defined problem. These solutions are then piloted in small ways to build up evidence that they are having the desired results. Now, with the Catalyze Fund, local impact partners are able to apply for funding to bring those tried and tested pilot projects up to scale. We are very excited that applications to the fund have just been submitted, and there are some really innovative projects that have been proposed. For example, there is a proposed project that will work with teachers to lead a new movement for positive educational change across Central Asia. And there is another initiative that seeks to support sustainable economic development in the Kyrgyz Republic by connecting women and youth to employment opportunities in the tourism and information technology sectors. So we are eagerly reviewing all the applications so that decisions as to which local projects will be funded will be made at the end of the month.
Thank you so much, Nora, for joining us today and for sharing so much interesting information about the Catalyze Fund, which is part of the Local Impact Program. Next, I would like to turn back to Khalil. Khalil, a number of questions have been coming in about AKF's geographic presence. Could you touch on where AKF programs operate around the world, and why have we chosen those specific regions?
Great question, Shaiza. I think our supporters will know that, of course, we have a presence in the US that is also matched by a presence in Canada and the UK, which are really offices focused on partnerships with institutional and individual supporters. We also have a headquarters in Geneva, but AKF is massively a field-based institution. I mean, it's the vast majority of its staff and its preoccupations are in the countries in the world where we work. Those are in South Asia and India and Pakistan, in Central Asia and Afghanistan, Tajikistan, the Kyrgyz Republic, a small presence in Russia. We have a presence in Eastern Africa, in Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, and Mozambique, and then in the Middle East, in Egypt, and in Syria. And I should add in Madagascar as well. So there is a pretty robust portfolio in Africa and Asia. Now, there are a whole host of reasons why the portfolio has that kind of geographic reach today. Some of those countries, frankly, we've been in for decades, and our current presence is a continuation of decades and decades of presence, sometimes going back as long as a century. In other countries, it is a more recent phenomenon, perhaps at the invitation of a government. In all cases, it is a specific decision by our board to enter a context because of our long-term commitment to the development process. We have to take a very long-term view in the decision to enter. It's always the case that we either have or are going to be able to build very strong and deep community relationships and ties, because that's a core element of our development philosophy. It is also the case that we have to bring something of value to the table, that there's something that AKF has learned or has a capability in that is relevant in a unique way to those contexts. And that's, of course, also a core principle of work. So that is the geographic reach and the general rationale for the portfolio as it stands today.
Thank you, Khalil. That's really interesting. And it's especially interesting that we can work in so many parts of the world and yet still not, and still work with these communities regardless of religion, race, ethnicity, and gender.
Shaiza, I think it's an important point you make, Shaiza. And I think, of course, it's a principle of work that where we establish a presence, then we work for everyone in the geographic catchment area, because often our experience is that the development issues that people face tend to be common across the geographic area. And so often we're taking an area-based approach, where we're trying to bring multiple inputs to bear in a concentrated geographic area to be able to really move the needle on quality of life. So when you do that, you're actually trying to create the conditions of improvement for everybody in a geographic area, irrespective of their background or affiliation.
That's really helpful to have that further elaboration, Khalil. And I think what you really highlighted is the breadth, the geographic breadth of the work, and how deep a history AKF and the AKADN has in so many of these regions, as you said, going back over a century in some of these areas.
Well, I was going to say, Shaiza, that a part of the benefit of the portfolio and its geographic reach is our ability to be also learning lessons across that portfolio and be able to experiment in one area or to learn certain lessons from another area and to see how they might play out in a geography. A lot of the places where we work have some geographic commonalities. We work in a lot of mountain areas. We work in a lot of coasts. And so some of the environmental and geographic conditions actually allow us to learn about and then to be able to share lessons across those geographies. And that's, of course, been a very powerful part of AKF's experience and ability to contribute new ideas and innovation to the places where we are operating.
So I think what you're saying is there's some fluidity there, right? That you learn from one area, which either has a similar geography or at least that particular area has a similar geography. And then you can apply that, might be a different part of the world, but you apply that learning to that other part of the world. And that may also transition to my next question, which I think is going to be more for Steve, which is Khalil has touched on the vast geography that we cover in Asia and in Africa. But how do these specific projects get chosen? How does AKF choose specific projects, and what are some of the key priorities that we use when we explore new programs?
That's a great question, Shaiza, and there's a few points I'd love to highlight here. I mean, first, I think it's important to recognize that the Aga Khan Foundation has an overarching mission of improving quality of life for the most vulnerable populations. And when you look at quality of life and the issues faced in the countries where we work, these are multi-sectoral issues, multi-dimensional issues. So we can't just intervene in one area. We must intervene across the board in all the areas that impact people's well-being. So that means that we work in the health sector, in education, in agriculture and food security, in climate resilience, and in many other sectors to respond to the specific issues that people are facing. And the other point I think is really important to raise here is that it's not us sitting in the US or Europe that are deciding what these projects are. We take our lead and our guidance, not only from our teams on the ground in the countries in which we work, but also from our beneficiary population and through their own voices and through their own institutions. And we really respond to those needs that are coming up to us from the ground. And so our projects are built around the pressing needs that our communities are facing and how best to resolve them. And to do that, we don't do it alone. We do it in close partnership with many others, including, first and foremost, the other agencies of the Aga Khan Development Network, who are supporting us with their specializations in health, in education, in economic development. But also, we work in close tandem with governments in the countries where we work and with local civil society organizations. And together, we develop and implement projects that are really getting to the root of what is keeping people in poverty and helping them to not only survive, but also thrive.
Thanks, Steve. That's really helpful. And I think something that both you and Khalil have touched on is flexibility, that we have priorities, we have the specific regions we work in, but we have to maintain flexibility as we receive input from our partners, from our constituents, who are the people in the field on the ground. And I think that this past 18 months has been really the hallmark of flexibility with the, in fact, ongoing COVID-19 global pandemic. It's obviously still very much relevant around the world, and particularly in the areas where AKF's presence is, where we have fewer vaccines available and fewer therapeutics. It's still very much a relevant issue. Now, many of you have asked how the pandemic is shaping AKF's global priorities and how we've needed to be flexible. And Khalil, perhaps you could touch on AKF's approach in the context of these new and continuously shifting COVID realities.
Well, Shaiza, it's, I think, obvious to everyone that the COVID pandemic has been a major challenge for the places in the world where we're working. I mean, it's been a challenge for everyone around the world, including so many of us in the US. What I would say is that, in a sense, COVID comes to us in disguise. It comes disguised as a health crisis, and of course, it is a health crisis. But if you take off the costume, what you see beneath, lurking beneath, is a educational crisis, because there's been so much educational disruption over the course of COVID. It's been a massive economic crisis. There have been people who have been so severely financially impacted by the crisis, the various lockdowns, the freezing of supply chains, the inability for people to work. All of these things have been very severely compromising to the economic outlook of families and, in fact, whole nations and regions. And it's also been a very serious gender equality crisis. We've seen very severe backsliding on gender equality gains that have been so hard fought over the last several decades. And that's, I think, and again, I think we can empathize with so much of this here in this part of the world. So many women have had to the burdens of unexpected care responsibilities for members of their family, both young ones and elders, but not only in the household, in the community and in the extended family. We also know that so many frontline workers in healthcare and education who are most at risk are mostly women. And so this is a crisis that has multiple dimensions. But maybe for some more detailed and expert response to the question of our COVID program, I should turn to my colleague, Dr. Claudia Hutzbeth, who is AKF's global lead for health, who has been at the center of so much of our global COVID response. Claudia, can you give us a bit of a snapshot of the core elements of our response and how they've been faring?
Thanks, Khalil. It's a pleasure to be here. As you said, my name is Claudia Hutzbeth. I'm the global lead for health for the Aga Khan Foundation. I mean, the COVID response has been really quite incredible from the whole of the AKDN, and we've really seen all of the different agencies of the Aga Khan Development Network come together around a common priority and a common threat. I think from the health perspective, the priority has really been kind of twofold, I would say. One is around prevention of disease and to try to stop the spread and support households who are affected from a kind of psychosocial perspective. And the second priority has really been around COVID diagnostics and treatment, kind of the core clinical response. Just on the prevention side of things, we've really seen a massive scale up and tapping into the deep community networks that the Aga Khan development agencies have in the areas that we work, and we've managed to do a ton of work around mobilizing communities to prevent spread, to prevent misinformation, to support families who are caring for infected loved ones at home, and to support parents and others in terms of helping their children manage home learning, which has been a very difficult thing for many parents, myself included. On the treatment side, we've done a ton initially around diagnostics. In many countries, when we started, there was absolutely no diagnostic capability set up, and so we have set up many areas where there's lab tests and diagnostics, and we're doing hundreds and hundreds of tests a day in those areas. For example, in Afghanistan, we have 4 treatment centers that we set up in the north of the country, and we have the capacity to do almost 1,000 tests a day. And luckily, we're not tapping into all of that capacity now because the caseloads are going down. But as we know, they go down and they go back up again. And so we're really well set up for doing quite a lot of testing across all of the countries where we work. And we are also serving as hubs for diagnostics as well, in that we're able to take test samples from patients and bring them to our hubs from many other parts of the countries as well. So like, for example, in Afghanistan, we're working all across the Northeast and taking tests from at least 8 provinces of the country, a third of the country roughly, and bringing it to our testing sites. On the treatment side, we've set up field hospitals. We've built capacity of a lot of health workers to treat COVID. And as everyone knows, it's a moving target, because initially what we thought was the right thing for treatment has not always proven, to have the best outcomes. So we've had to modify as new treatments come online, as new approaches come online, as we're learning about this disease. And so there's been a lot of capacity building, a lot of learning, a lot of tapping into the research that's being done by Aga Khan University and many others, and to really apply that in practice in the field hospitals that we've set up. And those field hospitals are still all functioning. And we're also have supported government extensively in terms of building their capacity, including through things like telemedicine, where we're able to bring ICU specialists from the Aga Khan University and other centers of excellence to help support governments in the farthest, remotest parts of the Central Asian Plateau and East African areas as well, to help support them with their ICU skills and capabilities, which before COVID were really very, very minimal in many of these very hard to reach areas. Just on one thing that's really close to my heart is nutrition. In many of the areas that we work in, at least a third of children are affected by undernutrition. And during the COVID crisis, because of the economic impact, we saw really a significant deterioration in nutrition as a result of poor food security and inability for many parents to go for their regular kind of child checkups and growth monitoring. And so we've been really working around the clock to try to counteract that impact on nutrition, and try to make sure that at best we maintain the nutritional indicators or improve them, as opposed to seeing the worsening of the indicators, which we have in many parts of the world.
Thank you so much, Claudia. COVID has clearly had a major impact around the world, but it is wonderful to hear how AKF has been able to play a major role at such short notice. Of course, here in the United States, we have all been impacted in so many different ways. I have previously introduced Sherina Ebrahim, our National Committee Chair, and now I would like to ask her a few questions on the US angle. Sherina, we have heard from Khalil, Steve, Nora, and Claudia about the extensive work that AKF does internationally. Could you comment a little bit about the US angle?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Shaiza. As others have already said so effectively, the focus of our programmatic efforts are really on the communities in Africa and Asia. That said, the US office plays an incredibly important role in building partnerships with government agencies, development agencies, private foundations, corporations, and donors to support our work abroad. And in addition to our partnerships that you've already heard about on USAID, and we'll hear a little bit about our partnership with the Conrad Hilton Foundation a little bit later, we also work to make connections and help the AKDN benefit from a wide range of organizations. So for example, we help connect them with philanthropic organizations like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Bezos Family Foundation, multilateral institutions like UNICEF, the World Bank, the United Nations Development Program, and our corporate partners like the Coca-Cola Foundation.
That's great to hear, Sherina. Those are some very impressive partners, and many of them are household names. Now, I understand that in the past 18 months, since the COVID-19 pandemic started, AKF has also leveraged new ways of raising awareness in the United States. Could you elaborate on this?
Yes, absolutely. Last year, we launched the Virtual Voyage when we weren't able to do our walks, our galas, our golfs in person. And we were so appreciative of the response that we got. And we're doing that again and expanding it to include the town hall that we're doing today. We also partnered with communities on shared topics and issues. So for example, in Birmingham, Alabama, we partnered with Rise Against Hunger and Ismaili Civic to package 10,000 meals with the mayor's office. And we were able also to share the work of AKF in food security and in alleviating hunger in Africa and Asia. Other things that we're doing as well this year, we're going to be a partner at the Johns Creek International Festival outside of Atlanta, where we're going to host a booth where we can share the work that we're doing around the world to impact the quality of lives of so many more. All of that to say that we're really active in the US and we're really excited to engage others who want to support and advance the causes of the foundation.
Thank you, Sherina. That was very informative. Now, you mentioned AKF's fundraising, and we have been receiving many questions about the use of donor funds for international programs versus administrative and overhead expenses. Zahid, could you tell us how much of the funds raised from our donors go towards AKF's actual projects as opposed to overhead?
Absolutely, Shaiza. At AKF USA, all donations raised go to support AKF's programs. None of your donations go toward AKF USA's operating expenses. Now, of course, we do have administrative and overhead costs, but these are not funded through donations. Instead, they are funded from contributions directly from His Highness the Aga Khan, cost recoveries from grants, from sponsorships, and from investment income on our cash balances.
That's great, Zahid, to know that 100% of the donations go to the actual programs. Following up on that, our donors are also curious about the overall sources of revenue for the foundation. Can you give us a sense of where these funds come from to support the work?
Great question, Shaiza. Majority of AKF USA's support comes from donor contributions in two forms: monthly recurring gifts and annual donations that so many of you have generously given. We have also been steadily growing our corporate matching gifts outreach. Currently, there are 20,000 employers in the US that will match the donations of their employees, usually on a one-on-one basis, essentially doubling your donation. We are thrilled that we surpassed last year's corporate matching total already earlier this year, and we are hopeful that more of our donors will look to take advantage of this. Another portion of the foundation's funds come from federal and philanthropic grants, and a final component of our income derives from investment income. For more information, we would refer you to look at our most recent annual report, which is available on AKF USA's website.
Fantastic. Thank you, Zahid. It is great to know that we have such a great donor base, as well as such a variety of sources of funding. Also, especially exciting to hear about the corporate matching program and what an accelerated pace we have received on the corporate matches this year. Next, I would like to bring Steve back in here. Steve, you touched earlier on the local impact project in Central Asia, as an example of one of the core AKF USA projects funded by our donors. Where else are these donor funds being directed?
Yeah, thanks, Shaiza. I mean, let me first start by saying that really the donor funds that we raise in the US are critical to the success of our international portfolio. Without those funds, we just simply wouldn't be able to strike the types of partnerships that we strike with USAID and with other donors. I'd love to tell you more today about a really brand new partnership, actually, that we've just made with the Conrad N. Hilton Foundation. They've agreed to join us in funding a really exciting early childhood development program over the next 3 years in East Africa. And this is being matched by donor funds that we have raised in the US. But rather than having me tell you about this, I'd love to turn it over to Dr. Amina Abubakar. Amina is the director of the Aga Khan University's Institute for Human Development, and she's based in Nairobi, Kenya. Amina, could you tell us a little bit more about the new Hilton initiative?
Thank you, Steve. So AKU, IHD specifically, we are extremely excited about this new initiative, which is a collaboration between us and the Institute for Education Development and the Sustainable Development Goal Platform in Kenya, alongside county governments in the frontier districts of Kenya. Now, what this new initiative has or aims to achieve are 3 major goals. The first one is actually to set up an ECD workforce hub. What this hub will aim to do is to first build the capacity of frontline workers, such as teachers, nurses, implementers in community-based organizations and NGOs. We'll build their capacity by holding several short courses. For instance, the science of early childhood education, a course on inclusive early childhood practices, specifically aimed at getting more children with disability into early childhood programs, but also a course on gender and ECD, so that we encourage more gender transformative practices within the ECD setting. The hub will also aim at really influencing policy and practice. We will do this through one, trying to, having policymakers workshop, where we work very closely with policymakers and senior government officials to get them to think about why ECD is a critical investment, and also for them to develop technical plans on how to implement ECD programs within their settings. We also support government officials by actually holding technical help chats and other kinds of support continuously to improve their practices and to assist them implement ECD programs. And lastly, we will produce knowledge into action products. These are things like policy briefs, advocacy messages, video and audio tapes that really can be used by people in the field to learn more about what is cutting edge in the field and how can they really translate knowledge into policy and practice. The other very exciting aspect about this initiative is the research that we plan. We plan to carry out a series of knowledge generation activities. One of the most exciting bits is ethnographic work, where we'll actually go out and document cultural practices in some of the most marginalized communities in Kenya, so that we look at what are the strengths within the community which we can leverage on to implement high quality ECD programs. And lastly, from our observation in the field, we noticed that there are very many stakeholders working in the ECD sector. Some are looking at nutrition, some are looking at WASH, while others are actually working on safety and security. However, none of them have really a platform to learn from each other, to interact and, to implement programs together. So we intend to set up a community of practice in the ECD area. And within this community of practice, we will meet regularly so that we share ongoing research evidence, we share our learnings, and we develop action plans together and influence each other's work positively. in the hope that by working together, we can really magnify our impact. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amina. We're delighted that you were able to join us today. Another one of the AKF programs that is being supported by USAID and by private donations is a project that is called Enhancing Employability and Civic Engagement of Youth in the Kyrgyz Republic. Now, that may not be the most creative or catchy title for a program, but it's a really interesting intervention that is essentially focused on youth in the Kyrgyz Republic, who make up almost a quarter of the population. Through this project, youth between the ages of 14 and 28 are able to access sought-after job skills through leadership training, business development programs, and entrepreneurship classes. Since 2017, we've seen more than 200 young entrepreneurs successfully complete these classes. 14 of them were supported with in-kind grants to start their own businesses after participating in a business pitch event. I'd love to share with you a clip from one of these budding young companies that I think you'll find quite uplifting. It's also on our Virtual Voyage microsite, along with more stories to be unveiled in the coming weeks. Check it out if you haven't already had the chance to visit us online.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you to all the panelists for your thoughts and insightful comments throughout this discussion. I especially love that video about the cobbler in Kyrgyzstan. So this past week, we have been focusing on Kyrgyzstan on the Virtual Voyage site, but going forward, you will see that we will be moving through Central Asia, next to Tajikistan, then to Pakistan, and then to Kenya. So moving across the world. And of course, we had Dr. Amina from Kenya on this panel by video. And we're just so happy that actually one of the great things about this pandemic is that we've been able to really enhance the use of technology. So we've been able to bring our global experts onto the panel with us, which has been so wonderful. So, you know, we had her coming in from Nairobi on that. Now we're going to move to the questions and answers that some of you have been sending in questions on the feed, on the chat. But we also received a lot of questions beforehand that we wanted to address in this portion of the panel. So just going back to our panelists right now, we've got Khalil, we've got Sherina, we've got Zahid, and we've got Steve. One of the questions that we did receive beforehand was, how do we, you know, if you're in the United States, you want to contribute, yes, you can contribute money. What other kinds of contributions and support can you provide? Sherina, could you please help us with that question?
Yes, absolutely. There's many ways for our supporters to volunteer. Everything from helping out with events, which hopefully will sometime not in the too distant future also be able to do in person again. Outreach, finance, marketing. There's a number of different ways for our supporters to help us. And in fact, for the Virtual Voyage campaign itself, we have over 200 volunteers helping us. So there's many ways for them to get involved. And the only other thing I'd also like to say is a huge thank you to all of the volunteers already who have been helping us on the campaign before and after. We could not do our work without you. And so if you're interested in volunteering, please go to rd.akfusa@akdn.org.
Thank you, Sherina. And I believe that email address, someone from AKF did put that email address on the chat, because some people said they had questions they wanted to ask by email and not live on this forum. So please do feel free. That is a website, an email address that is being monitored, and someone will get back to you on that. We've also received a question, I believe, on the fundraising for this virtual voyage. And I believe we've been getting donations throughout this program this morning as well. I'm just getting a feed on that. But in general, Zahid, if you could just talk about how much money does AKF USA raise every year? What is our target for the virtual voyage? If you could address those kinds of questions, that would be very helpful.
Absolutely, Shaiza. The Virtual Voyage campaign is a component of our total fundraising. There are other components of fundraising that we do every year, just to name a few, which are a monthly giving. We have point of sales campaigns, and also our corporate matching campaign, which we are very excited about. The total fundraising on an average is about $12 million. And this year's target for the Virtual Voyage campaign is $5.6 million.
Okay, terrific. And we have just really generous donors whom I think will help us meet those targets. Khalil, now the money that comes in for the Virtual Voyage, we had some questions, is this money being used for an endowment? How are the funds that are being raised for Virtual Voyage being used?
Great questions, Shaiza, and just to say how remarkable it is, the generosity that's already coming in, even just in the 45 minutes or so that we've been together so far. And so let me just reiterate Zahid's gratitude to all those who are inspired by what you've been hearing so far. This Virtual Voyage campaign is really important for our work because it has this beautiful attribute to it, which is that it's coming to support the general AKF program. It's not designated to a specific sliver of it. So the people who are now contributing to the Voyage campaign are effectively supporting the global capacity of AKF and actually many parts of the AKDN to continue to respond to emerging priorities, but also to continue to build capacity to respond to enduring issues in the communities where we're working. This allows us to respond as board priorities emerge, to be able to understand dynamics in the field and to be able to be agile in the face of those dynamics. And then very, very importantly, allows us to put our donations forward as a way to attract other much larger institutional donor contributions. And those are from US donors, increasingly donors from other parts of the world as well. And this allows us to leverage several times, 1, 2, 3, 4, sometimes 7, 8, 9 times with the right kind of institutional partners. So this particular campaign is got such a beautiful aspect to it that everyone who's going to contribute now a penny should feel that they're effectively contributing to everything we are doing around the world. And in that, I think they should feel great confidence and comfort and satisfaction for the kind of impact their contributions are having. I see you've also asked, and I know you're reflecting some of the questions that have come in the chat around endowments, and this is also a long-term strategy of the AKDN globally. We have a very specific area of contribution through our planned and legacy giving program, and I'll ask maybe someone, one of our teammates, to put the link in the chat, or at least an email address, and maybe it's just repeating the RD email address for those who are interested in the planned and legacy giving program. This program is we've agreed, the board has agreed that the proceeds from the planned and legacy giving program will contribute to endowments in the AKDN that have been already established. And in that way, they're effectively having a permanent impact on the institutions that have been established and the work that they are doing. So the Virtual Voyage campaign, we're using that money in a kind of current programmatic way to support all kinds of priorities across the system. And then the Plan and Legacy Giving Program, where people have been so generous, also is an opportunity to contribute to these long-term endowments.
Thank you. So we've got different ways of contributing, but the Virtual Voyage is for unrestricted funding, so we can maintain the flexibility and maximize the use of the funds for the programs that most need it. Another question that we received beforehand, which I think, Steve, you might be the best person to respond to this one, which is, we've talked, you and Khalil talked quite a bit about, the countries we work in and the kind of partners we work with. But why would a specific partner, whether it's a government partner or a corporate foundation, why do they choose to work with AKF? What are the qualities that they see appealing, and why do certain types of donors gravitate, or certain types of donor partners gravitate towards AKF?
Yeah, that's a great question, Shaiza. I think there are multiple reasons for it, but I'd like to perhaps highlight three main ones. I think the first is really the long-term nature of our engagement in the countries in which we work and our deep local rootedness in those countries. Most of the places where the Aga Khan Foundation works, we've been around for 30, 40, 50 years. And the vast majority of our team in those countries are from those countries. So we have a deep understanding of really the factors that are influencing people's lives and livelihoods in those countries, and a deep connection to those issues, and are therefore very well placed to address them. The second reason I would say is really related to the holistic and strategic nature of our work. We don't go in there just with one issue in mind. We're looking at all the factors that influence people's quality of life, and we're looking at how we can best address them. So this is health issues, education issues, agriculture, all these issues. And we as a foundation and as the Aga Khan Development Network are able to step in and work on all those issues in a very integrated manner and also a strategic manner. We make plans for the far into the future. We're looking ahead to the next 30, 40 years as we do our work. And the third and final reason I would just say is based on our impact. We have a history of really achieving the results we set out to achieve and being able to demonstrate those. We actually invest quite a lot of resources in monitoring and evaluation and research and learning, which really shows, where we are succeeding and how we are succeeding, but also shows perhaps where we're not doing as much as we should be doing, and then pointing out the way forward and how we can continue to evolve and have the desired impact. And that partners really value that demonstration of impact.
Thanks, Steve. I think you really touched on something which we haven't really talked about before, which is the monitoring and evaluation of the impact. And you also talked about the number of local people we hire on the ground, right? That I know you have been with AKF in West Africa and East Africa, like I mentioned in your introduction. But I imagine when you were in those countries, you were one of maybe 5 or 6 expats, and then there were probably thousands of people who actually are from those countries. Am I correct in that kind of order of magnitude?
Definitely, Shaiza. I was the exception, not the rule. And increasingly now our senior leadership in all the countries in which we work are from those countries. And that is so critical because they have not only the knowledge, but also the relationships that are so important to make sure that we're able to have the impact that we want to have.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'm even recently hearing about that in Afghanistan, right, where we have probably 10,000 people on the ground, but very few in the expat side. So I think that's very important wherever you are in East Africa or in Pakistan. So I think I'm just checking to see if we have more questions coming in. I don't see any more, so I think maybe we can go to a quick close. I want to thank all the panelists, both those of you who are with us right now, as well as the ones that came in internationally. And also we had Michael Coker's comments to the United Nations a couple of weeks ago at the beginning of this program. But if before we close, I think if we can, Zahid, if you want to say a few words, and then we'll go to a close with Khalil.
Thank you, Shaiza. It's been a pleasure to be here today. If I may, I'd like to invite all of you who have joined us today to consider a one-time contribution or, make a monthly contribution. Besides, I want to acknowledge once again those during our town hall today who have actually contributed. So that means a lot to us and appreciate your support. You can go to our Virtual Voyage microsite where there is a donation form for each of you if you would like to make a gift. Your generosity for decades has enabled the Aga Khan Foundation to undertake a wide range of activities. And it is with your ongoing help that we will continue this critical work. We really appreciate your support.
Thanks, Zahid. And Khalil, do you have some final words you want to share before we close?
Thanks, Shaiza. No, just to reiterate these extraordinary expressions of gratitude, because the supporters we have, both donors, sponsors, and of course all of our volunteers are the lifeblood of this institution. They are what allows us to function, not only here in the US, but actually around the world. And what I wanted to just say as we bring this to a conclusion is that the ethic of service, of contribution, and of volunteerism is something that AKF relies on in every community and village in every part of the world where we work, where people decide to make that fateful decision to turn away from just concerned about their own family or their household and become concerned about the community and the country and the world. This is what we call civil society in the AKDN and why it's such an important part of our overall approach to development. But that decision that individuals around the world make is like an invisible thread woven kind of with our ideas and ideals that connects people across geographies, across all kinds of differences throughout the AKDN world. And I want people here to understand that when they make these contributions, what they're making, and they have made for decades, if you've been with us for many years, or if you're new, you're making it for the first time, either you're a sponsor, you might be a donor, you might be a volunteer, that though the sum total of those contributions are an expression, a global expression of both solidarity, but also just this hope for a better quality of life for the future. And that's something that's not unique to Africa or to Asia. It's an aspiration that connects us all as a single humanity. If there is one thing that COVID has taught us everywhere in the world, is that we are totally in this together. Our interdependence is now inescapable. If we always knew it, over the last 18 months, we have felt it. And so this work that you're all doing and enabling the AKDN institutions around the world to do through your support for AKF USA is an extraordinary expression of that idea. And I want to just express, I think, our collective gratitude and admiration for all what that means to us, and to let you know that without that support, our work would not be possible. And with that support, our confidence and our ambitions for the future know no bounds.
Thank you, Khalil. Thank you to all of you. And thank you as we end on this aspiration of hope and community. Thank you all who were viewing today for being part of this aspiration. Good afternoon.